Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Emmy the Cat Lady, and you join me here on the Long 15 at the Mojave Outpost to talk about the TV show. So I did decide to kind of cover the episodes. So you're getting a double bill today. We're going to talk about episodes 1 and 2. And then on Thursday, we will pick up episode 3, which will be available to watch tomorrow. So the plan is to talk about what happens in the TV show, what it might mean. So there will be some speculation in here and some thoughts, some fun little Easter eggs and things that I noticed in the show, as well as a bit of background on some things that people who are watching the TV show but haven't played the games may not be that familiar with, and a reminder for people that haven't played the games for a long time that might need a bit of a refresher on certain things. So I don't want to use to get clips from the TV show because copyright issues and all that kind of thing, but um I think it's going to be very interesting. So we're starting here. This is along 15 at the Mojave Outpost, so it's a sort of main highway that actually leads into California, because we know that pretty much everybody in the Fallout TV show, other than the people that were still in the three vaults, has kind of made their way to the Mojave Wasteland at this point. So we're gonna just kind of follow the road and see what we can find. So this is the Mojave Outpost. So this is the first stop for caravans that are coming from the NCR territory into the Mojave Wasteland. As well as there's these big statues that commemorate the NCR and the Desert Rangers joining forces. So at the end of season 1, there was a bunch of plot threads that had been set up by the first season. There's a few pre-war ones and a few post-war ones. So for those of you who don't know the games and maybe don't know this, the pre-war era was before the 23rd of October 2077, which is the date that the bombs fell, and the TV show in its modern day is set in 2296, so that's 219 years later. So pre-war, we saw Cooper Howard learning the truth about Vault-Tec and who his wife really works for. We also have Moldaver, who created Cold Fusion, and she has a campaign against Vault-Tec and their investors because they basically sold her work and claimed it as their own, essentially. So, there's that, and the fact that we don't really know exactly how she managed to survive 219 years into the future. So there's Prim in the distance. So we're just going to follow the road up towards Novak while we chat. So there's also the war itself and some of the preceding issues in the US. So there was wars about resources and things like that, and a lot of stuff happening around the world, not just in the US. And there was also, we got some hints that Mr. House is involved, and since we know that we are heading to New Vegas, fully expect him to be involved in some capacity going forward. And then in the post-war, we've got Hank McLean, who stole power armor and made his way to New Vegas, as we saw at the very end of season 1, and Lucy and the Ghoul, who are following in his footsteps to try to find out what he's up to. And Norm is trapped in Vault 31 with a brain on a Roomba, and Vault 33 is facing a crisis thanks to that pesky water chip. It's a common enough issue in the vaults. Those water chips are not great and they break a lot of the time. And the Vault 33 residents were split and half of them were sent to Vault 32. So we're going to see what happens there. So for the first episode, let's start with the pre-war stuff because we get quite a bit of that. And the season opens up on a protest where people are beating up a Mr. Handy robot and they have picket signs against Robco. This isn't a huge surprise, as there was a big socio-economic issue before the bombs fell, which was that, robots were being invented and people were using them to do all kinds of jobs. And also the wars of the time were over dwindling resources. So the last of the remaining oil in Alaska is why China invaded, and the US had a 10-year war against them where they annexed Canada. and eventually managed to win the battle, but it took a lot out of them to be able to do that, to take Alaska back, essentially. So, that was a thing. And there was also issues elsewhere in the world that we knew about. So, particularly if we look at, my side of the pond, so there was big war between the European Commonwealth, which is what's now kind of the European Union, and the Middle East, again over some of the remaining fossil fuels and things. And that led to the breakdown of the European Commonwealth and also the United Nations. So things were kind of falling apart all over the place before the bombs fell. And hyperinflation is something that we see in the pre-war world. So if you look at any of the comic books that you can find, they cost like $40, which is bonkers. And people were losing their jobs left and right, because Robco and General Atomics between them produced a huge range of robots that could be used for all kinds of things: security, construction, manufacturing, housework. Domestic robots were becoming a thing. What have we found here? Coyote Den. And even office work and management and things like that in some cases were a thing. So people were losing their jobs, and the cost of living was skyrocketing. And part of that was because the US government basically had no money left because they were fighting this protracted war against China. So companies were saving money by, hiring robots that don't need to be paid, don't need breaks, vacation time, don't need sick pay. And most of the models, like the Mr. Handy units and things, they could self-maintain, self-repair, or repair each other. They're cheaper. Less labour cost means more profit. So a lot of these people have lost their jobs and they're upset about this, rightfully so. People can't afford basic necessities. Resource shortages are driving up prices. There's some little bark scorpions. Need to be careful of their venom. So they're angry and they're protesting, and then we see them talking about it in a bar. And Mr. House is there, and he challenges these men who are angry about what his body double, we think it's a body double, was saying on TV. And the way he speaks to them is very patronising. It definitely sounds a lot like the way Mr. House speaks. He is like that. He thinks himself to be smarter and better than everybody else, and he certainly is a very intelligent man, a very clever man. But yeah, so he offers them a bunch of money to let him test this device, this little device, on them, and they kind of say no, but House puts it on Bill, who's the bald guy, anyway, and makes him beat up his friends with the baseball bat. So this device seems to be like a mind control device of some kind. And then he loses control of the guy, so when he turns up the intensity of the signal, the guy's head explodes. Oh, hello. Yeah, I've got combat turned off, but the bighorners get quite angry, especially when they have babies around. So we're just gonna leave them alone as we follow this railroad. But yeah, so it's something, it makes a guy's head explode, which is spectacular. And it's not that different from the bomb collars that Father Elijah is so fond of. He used bomb collars to control people. He used to be part of the Brotherhood of Steel. So the device still needs work. It's not perfect, just yet. So there's still a lot to be done in order to get it working the way he wants. And I think the line that Mr. House ends on is absolute perfection, because what it does is it tells us his core philosophy, um, which is the world may end, but progress marches on. This is exactly what he has based everything he does on. So if you play through Fallout New Vegas and you do Mr. House's ending and you dig into the dialogue and talk to him about everything, then he is quite upfront about what his plans are, what his intentions are. So after the world has ended, his intention is to take control of Vegas and get working on improving his technology and raising money through the casinos in order to do that. He just wants to keep progressing his technology. That's been his goal from the start. And his end game plan is to send people out into space to colonize a better planet and have a fresh start for humanity. And he made investments in Vault-Tec, but House is playing his own game, and he has been for over 200 years at this point. And the House always wins. That's the rule of thumb in casinos. So he is playing his own game. I did think that the mention of the nail gun was quite interesting in this opening scene. So I do wonder if we are going to see Anthony House, who's Robert House's half brother, who stole his inheritance after their parents were killed. And it was a whole thing. I do have a video about Anthony House if you don't know who he is. He's got quite an interesting story. But he basically owned the H&H Tools factory and made this nail gun, which you can find as a weapon in one of the DLCs in this game. They're just powder gangers. I'm kind of friendly with those guys, so they're not going to attack me, so that's fine. So it just would be interesting to see if he crops up at all going forward in the, maybe in the pre-war scenes at some point. And I suppose we need to talk about the fact that he basically forced this guy to be a test subject against their will. Is that unethical? Of course it is. Does Robert House care? No. Progress and technological advancement is his goal. He definitely believes that to make an omelette, you have to crack a few eggs. Yep, that joke was right there. Wait, I've gone the wrong way here. I've ended up at Sloan. Okay, sure thing. Right. Yeah, sure. There we go. There's Lucky 38 poster. So you do see the billboards for all these places, but I've walked completely the wrong direction. Somehow. That's silly. Right, back to Wilform Ranch. Yeah, I had to make that joke. Crack a few eggs, but at that investors meeting at the end of season one, if you remember, that they were told, you'll have free reign to do what you like with your vaults, whatever experiments you want to do, nobody will know, you can do what you want essentially. And a lot of the things that they mentioned at that meeting actually happened in the vault. So, putting psychoactive drugs in the air filtration system. That happened in Vault 106 in the Capital Wasteland, which is in the DC. That vault is in the DC area. For those of you that haven't played the games, you can explore it in Fallout 3. So the majority of the vaults actually had some kind of experiment going on. There was only around 17 control vaults, as they were called, that worked as the public expected them all to be, as they were intended in quotation marks. So, but outside of the vaults and Vault-Tec's shenanigans, there was a lot of unethical stuff going on in other corporations. So Nuka-Cola sent out cheese and fruit gift baskets to people whose family members died while they were taste testing Nuka-Cola Quantum. And Big Mountain is a closed off facility that did all kinds of wacky experiments, and they had a prison camp called Little Yangtze, which was full of Chinese descent people that were rounded up and taken there to be subjected to horrific experiments and the like. So, it wasn't just Vault-Tec that were evil. Oh, who's that? Is that Bright Brotherhood follower? It is, yeah. Um, so there was a lot of not very nice things happening in pre-war America, and I think it's interesting to see the change in the relationship between Cooper and Barb after he spied on the investors meeting and heard what she said, that Vault-Tec were prepared to drop the bombs themselves. I don't believe that they did, but it was enough to suggest that they were willing to do so if nobody else did it first. And he obviously got quite upset about this whole situation. So he went home and told Janie, his daughter, to pack a bag, and they were going to drive to Bakersfield. So I'll come back to that location because that location is relevant and significant here. But they get caught up behind a Vault-Tec van, and the sales rep sees him and smirks at him. So Cooper's beginning to resent having been the guy selling the end of the world to people, understandably. And he hears on the radio that there's going to be a siren test for the sort of air raid siren happening. But people are beginning to panic when the sirens start, even though the loudspeakers also say, "This is a test, don't panic." Everybody's panicking. People are screaming that they're all going to die and freaking out. A vertibird flies overhead. So it really does highlight very well how worried people are. You know, that people are worried that the nuclear war is coming. They're concerned about it. They're aware that it's a threat at the moment. So the slightest hint of anything is sending them into a panic. Um, you know, and then later on the radio, when Cooper goes back home, they're talking about who will press the button. It's not a question of if it's going to happen, it's a question of when it's going to happen. It's very reminiscent of the opening of Fallout 4, where, you know, the bombs are coming and you hear it on the TV, and then everybody's panicking and running to the vault and all that kind of thing. So, you know, the fear was there, the panic was there for a long time. And I do want to talk about the end of that scene, when Barb comes home and Cooper is there, because I think it's amazing work by both actors. They know that they're both hiding things from each other. Cooper has learned things about his wife. We don't know if she knows he's been spying, but potentially it could be that, you know, she is having a lot of guilt about what's going to happen. But they both take a moment to take a breath and collect themselves, and then they paint on these smiles, pretending to be the happy family that they are no longer. And I think both actors really sell that pretending everything's fine smile, where, you know, they're both kind of like, yeah, everything's great, love you, but they both know that things are deteriorating. So I think it is really, really well done. And then the woman that would become Moldaver, who apparently is called Kate Williams pre-war. So she meets up with Cooper, and he is supposed to go with her. She's supposed to be going to Vegas to meet Mr. House. Um, and in the trailer, we do see both Cooper and Barb in a car driving past the Lucky 38, so they must go there at some point. And she wants, Kate Williams, Moldaver, wants Cooper to stop Mr. House using his fame as a way to get in to actually see the man in person. Mr. House became quite reclusive and seems to be using a body double for public appearances. This is what we're getting, the fact that we've got two different actors playing the same character in the same scene, essentially. And remember that Robert House is based on Howard Hughes, but we're apparently sending Hollywood actors out as assassins now, which is kind of wild. And it's all because of this cold fusion technology, which Moldaver claims to have developed. And it's been, yeah. So, you know, it's kind of, she says it was her thing and Vault-Tec stole it and now they're selling it to Mr. House. And she talks about how Mr. House is preparing a missile system, and because of what Cooper heard, she thinks that his intention is to drop the bombs on behalf of Vault-Tec. But if you played Fallout New Vegas, you'll know that actually his intention with this missile defense system is the exact opposite of that. And what actually happened was that Mr. House shot down most of the nuclear bombs to protect Vegas and the area around it. That was his goal. He wanted Vegas for himself. He did not want his beloved city to be damaged by the nuke, so he had set up a system. The goal was to take out all of the bombs, but due to some issues with software upgrades, he didn't manage to get it fully online in time, but he still managed to protect Vegas and the surrounding area from almost all of the nuclear bombs that were sent in this direction. So, you know, that's going to be an interesting thing, because what they're assuming Mr. House is going to do is the opposite of what he is actually intending to do. But we do also need to talk about Bakersfield, because this is something that's quite big, really. So Janie is obviously Cooper's reason for living, that, he loves his daughter, he wants to make sure she's safe. And the reason that he's still around is because he wants to know what happened to her and where she went. And his wife, or probably ex-wife, from the beginning of episode 1, it seems like they were separated and possibly divorced because Cooper was doing children's parties to make money, and the men were muttering about how it was because he was paying alimony, which is a payment that's ordered after a divorce to make up for a serious disparity in earnings between the spouses. It's not something that's always awarded, but it depends on a various number of circumstances and also the local laws. It is something that exists in the UK as well. It's usually called spousal maintenance, but sometimes in Scotland it's known as aliment too. Scotland, we have our own laws essentially separate from England and Wales, so there's different kind of terminology and things like that, but it is something that exists. So if they were separated, then that means that Cooper's place with his family and the good vault with his wife had probably been revoked, but I would assume that she would still want Janie to go with her into the vault. And I don't think they're in 31 or anything because Barb isn't a junior executive, she's higher up than that, or she wouldn't have been in that investor meeting. So we don't really know yet what happened. This obviously what the ghoul is looking for, is to find out exactly what happened. And she was obviously with Cooper when the bombs fell, but at some point she was no longer with him, and obviously I think Barb must have managed to take her from him at some point, and they got separated and things. So it's an interesting thing, but Bakersfield is a location that's obviously in California. And it's mentioned several times by Cooper in the pre-war scenes. So, he wanted to retire, give up Hollywood, give up acting, and buy a ranch and raise chickens in Bakersfield when he overhears the revelations about Vault-Tec. He tells Janie to pack a bag and they're going to go to Bakersfield. He has said that he's obviously worth a lot of money because he's a famous actor and all the rest of it, so he could buy a spot in the vault if he wanted to. So is it possible that he moved out to Bakersfield and did just that? Because do you know which vault is in Bakersfield? Is Vault 12, which you encounter in the original Fallout game. And Vault 12's experiment was on radiation on humans. So the blast door, the big gear-shaped blast door didn't close properly. So what happened was all the residents inside Vault 12 became ghouls. So it's not been confirmed, but I'm pretty convinced that that's what happened to Cooper, that he, after splitting with his wife, he moved to Bakersfield, bought a place in Vault 12, and that's how he ended up a ghoul. It's possible that's not what happened, but given that Bakersfield has been mentioned by him several times, it does make me think that. And he does seem to be kind of aware of some of the things that have happened in the vaults, because he says that, he wants to know if his family is alive, dead, or something much worse. So he's aware that, dead might not be the worst thing that could happen to them in the vaults. Like he's got some first-hand experience of some of the horrors that were brought about by the vault experiments, and that does kind of make sense. He obviously knows the area around California, and he may well have walked the Mojave too at some point. But just given that he's mentioned Bakersfield a couple of times, it does make me wonder. So back to the post-war, and we're here at Novac. So this is Manny Vargas. He is, he used to be a Great Khan and then became a NCR sniper, and now he lives here. And he takes the day shift in Dinky the Dinosaur to protect the city, well, the town of Novac, from any nasties that come up the road. So that's where we end up here, and it seems that the Great Khans moved in. So the Great Khans are actually quite an old faction, although they have gone through many kind of versions, if you will. But they originated in Vault 15 as the Khans, and you come across them in the original Fallout game, and then moved around a couple of times and they ended up here. So it seems that since the end of Fallout New Vegas, they've ended up in Novac, which is where we are here. They've redecorated. Dinky the Dinosaur has been turned around to face into the town. As you can see in the game, he faces outside the town, and somebody built a swimming pool in the middle. It's I can understand that people will be like, oh, they've redesigned Novak and blah blah blah, but it was done for cinematic reasons and to make the opening scenes with Lucy and the Ghoul entertaining, so I can kind of forgive them for that. I do like how they used the diving board of the pool for their makeshift gallows. That's quite clever. And Lucy obviously does what she does. She's like, I'm going to try the nice approach, but the Great Khans are not always nice people. They are drug chem dealers. They make and sell drugs to people, and they're only a few steps above being a raider. So I do kind of wonder what happened to the rest of the residents of Novak, because there's a few people, that make their home here. It would be good to have a scene with Nobark Noonan, who's the crazy man that lives here, but actually some of his observations are quite useful. But we get a fun and gratuitously violent fight scene in Novak with Big Iron playing, which is the perfect music choice. Reminds us we're definitely in the Mojave now. And I think the way they use the music, both the scores, the original scores and the song choices from the games and the ones that they use are absolute perfection. No notes, everything is spot on. And sometimes the song choice tells us quite a bit about what's going on in the scene in front of us, which I think is great. The other little detail that I loved was the ghoul using a fusion core to heal the sores on his neck. So obviously where he had the barbed wire and rope around his neck, it caused damage, and he used the fusion core to basically heal that, because ghouls are healed by radiation. And I loved Lucy's look of disappointment, because the violence, it's very in character for her, but I think she's starting to realise that, the nice approach maybe isn't always going to be that helpful, and it's possible that that's the kind of thing that could lead her into more trouble in the future, because she's still too trusting of people and trusting that, everyone has goodness inside of them and all that kind of thing. But they have a conversation about how the bombs that were fired at Vegas were mostly shot down. So that conflicts with what is being discussed between Kate Williams / Moldaver and Cooper in the pre-war scenes, where she says he's building all these missiles, he's going to drop the bombs. But now Cooper, as the ghoul, knows that that's not what happened, and that was never what Mr. House's intentions were. He shot down the bombs to protect Vegas, and it was almost perfectly prepared for it, but because the platinum chip delivery was 204 years too late and being delivered to him, the chip held an operating system upgrade that would make sure that his defense systems were perfect, and that didn't happen because it was delayed, and it was just one day too late essentially before the bombs fell, and it eventually gets delivered, and that's kind of the plot of New Vegas. But they're following the trail and they find a guy who's been kind of split in two, and the girl thinks Hank did it, and it probably is, but Lucy is starting to kind of come to terms with the fact that her father is not who she thought he was, and that, he is potentially going to be the bad guy of this story, and that seems to be pretty likely. Oh, there's no bark there. So, interesting one there, and I think the lesson where she first learned what he did to Shady Sands, we're going to see how that relationship and how things are going to progress there with what Lucy's dad is up to. A side note, does anybody else think that the dead guy looks a bit like Todd Howard? Because to me, he looks a bit like Todd Howard. Anyway, the concept of flea soup is horrifying. I'm grateful that the fleas are not 2 feet tall, because normal sized ones are disgusting enough to look at. And just gives me the heebie-jeebies, makes me feel itchy just thinking about them. We don't like fleas, they're disgusting. No fleas, not in this house. But they managed to get the directions without killing a helpless old lady, so that's nice. And they go into a vault that is not actually in this game, but in theory is somewhere in this area. And there is a drive-in movie theatre over here. And it's Vault 24, so, sort of drive-in movie theatre. This one doesn't have the Starlight, but it seems like the Starlight drive-in is like a franchise, like McDonald's or Starbucks or Odeon Cinemas or whatever. Small non-corporate Yeah, so likelihood is the vault's somewhere maybe in this area, Vault 24, and it's an absolute horror show. Big surprise. It does seem like this one may have been planned to be included in Fallout New Vegas at some point, but it didn't make the cut for some reason. This game was made in like 18 months, to be fair, so there is an awful lot of cut content. There we go. Oh Christ, there's more. It's actually wiping out an entire family of mole rats. That's a bit mean, but never mind. But you can use console commands to actually get the jumpsuit. But what happened in this vault is kind of wild. That they basically were brainwashing people into being communists. And it's obviously done by force, given that we've got the people sitting in chairs with those things to hold their eyes open, and the film reel is still running as well. Even though everybody's dead and rotting away, but their heads are intact. And we do see the little mind control device thingy that Mr. House had at the beginning. So maybe that was the real experiment here. And that does seem likely with what we see later on in the episode. We don't really know how everybody died, but they were left where they fell. Until we see that there's a trail of sugar bombs, which the cereal apparently is a real cereal as well, or it was at some point in history. But remember that was Hank's nickname for Lucy. That's what he called her, was his little sugar bombs. So it does kind of suggest that this is a little breadcrumb trail that's been left for her that he knows that she's following. And Blondie, strapped to the chair, has one of these devices on him and has become a really creepy self-destructing voicemail. Hank's telling Lucy to go home because he's going to fix everything. And I think the horror and the shift in Lucy's mindset is really well shown by the actress in this scene. She knows that she needs to do something to stop him because he's not going to stop hurting people to get what he wants, whatever that would happen to be. And I think it's also interesting to note that the ghoul seems to recognise that little mind control device. So I wonder if he has seen them before. In the flashbacks and the trailers confirm that he's at least interacted with Mr. House pre-war. So I suspect we're going to find out more about that in the coming episodes. Here we are at Nipton, where the Legion took over. So we do finally catch up with Hank at some secret Vault-Tec facility. We've no real confirmation of exactly where it is. It could be anywhere underground in the mountains. It could be anywhere. We don't really know yet. I'm sure we will find out going forward. But I like how before he even takes the power armor off, he makes himself a coffee. I can respect that as someone that runs on caffeine. He dresses up in a fancy suit and he's shiny new Pip-Boy. It's not the Pimp-Boy 3 billion, but it does kind of look like the Fallout 4 model to me. The Pimp-Boy 3 billion is one that you can acquire in this game, and it's shiny and covered in like diamonds or something, and it's made of gold and it's all shiny, but I don't think it's actually that one. But he's reporting for duty, sir, and to who is the question. He says nobody at Vault-Tec knows he's here, but he hopes whoever it is still alive. The line about this mysterious boss calculating all possible contingencies to stay alive really hints at it being Mr. House. He also mentions Vegas as this person's old stomping grounds, so it really does suggest that it is Mr. House that we're talking about, that he's working for, with the device being involved in things as well. That seems to be the most likely, but this show does like to subvert expectations like that, so who knows. But I think the song, again, the choice of music and the choice of songs that they use in these games, well, the games as well, but in the TV show is really, really good. So it's Working for the Man by Roy Orbison, and that tells us what Hank's going to do. So, they've been working on making these control devices smaller and less noticeable. And Hank wants to get this promotion. I think the thing that he says is, when this is all over, you'll be begging me to help you. That's quite sinister. And I don't know what he means exactly. But it does seem like he's maybe intending a power grab. If it is Mr. House, then maybe he wants to seize the power and assets that Mr. House has for himself. And the song kind of answers this as well, because the line, because the company and the daughter, you see, they're both going to be all mine. I'm going to be the man. So the song is really telling us exactly what Hank's intentions are. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. The choice of song, it's always intentional, and the lyrics of the songs usually tell us something about what's going on. And he's obviously going to try and find a way to convince or force Lucy to be on his side. That seems to be the intention. Vault 32 is only featured for one short scene, but poor Chet is having issues because he's basically stuck as the official babysitter. Everybody's forgotten that the child isn't his, including Steph, the mother, and the child ends up getting called Chet Jr., much to his chagrin. Stephanie's the new overseer there, and she's not coping too well with it, to be honest. She seems to be getting quite frustrated and a little bit murderous, given the way she tackles that orange with a flick knife. I have concerns that things are going to go horribly awry in Vault 32 at some point. And in Vault 33, they're trying to fix the water chip, and Reg seems to be a bit lost. Norm has been sent for special training to Vault 31, so that tells me that Betty knows exactly where Norm is and what he's been up to. That really confirms that for me. She knows that that's where he is, and she thinks that he's just going to end up dying there, I guess. But somebody has shut down the intervault communications. So Reg goes off to find something to do. He sets up a support group for the products of inbreeding. Are we surprised by this? Because honestly, I'm not. If you have a closed off group like that, a closed population, eventually the population's going to have to either open up to outsiders, start inbreeding, or die out eventually. That's just the way these things go. So you do have to be, and I didn't like the sign there where it said that specially abled instead, or just feel different because your parents are closely related. Come join our group. Let your voice be heard in a warm, understanding environment free of judgment and criticism. So that's nice, but especially abled makes me cringe because it speaks of this, PC trying to be avoid saying certain words because you're worried that they're going to cause offence. Oh, great. The Legion are trying to assassinate me again. So it just kind of gives me the ick to hear, that kind of terminology. Oh, I need some Stimpaks. There's really nothing wrong with using the word disabled. There is absolutely no reason that you can't use that word. I don't know any disabled people that are going to be offended by it. As a disabled person, I'm not offended by it. Saying differently abled or specially abled, it's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense, and I don't like it. But it fits with the kind of thing that Vault-Tec would do. That kind of tracks what I would expect to see from them. But it still gives me the ick, in a big way. I mean, it is kind of fun making people explode. I'm not going to deny that, but anyway. Oh, there's just bits of dead legionaries flying about. Interesting. Anyway, so yeah, that kind of gives me the ick. It's just these euphemisms that, it's just it needs to stop. But there's those two people who are acting like a couple, and they both have red hair, and they want to change the rules about inbreeding, and we don't really know their relationship. They could be siblings, they could be cousins, who knows. But red hair is a recessive trait, so you need two copies of the gene to have a child with red hairs, and it's quite a rare gene, so it's possible that these two are actually related quite closely, which means they definitely should not be having children together from a genetic standpoint. But Anyway, it seems to be a thing, and you're going to have problems when the family tree is a wreath. But the previews do suggest that something kind of bonkers is going to happen. Something's going to happen in these vaults in the future, and I think it's going to be absolutely wild. So yeah, it should be an interesting one to see going forward. And then we get back to Norm and his new friend Bud, Roomba Askins, because Norm's not doing too well. He's managed to find some emergency water and food supplies, but it's not enough to sustain him, and he is not coping too well. And Bud is constantly taunting him about this fact and telling him, "You're gonna die if you don't do something." And he offers him two rational choices. Get in the cryopod and be frozen until Bud decides to defrost him, or a quick death where he becomes fertilizer. And Norm chooses secret third thing. He decides to thaw everybody out, and all at the same time when it's supposed to be one every 30 years. And he says, the line he says there about chaos is easy is, oh, it's so good. It is so good, and I can't wait to see what happens to Bud in the future. It's brilliant, and I love the fact that Norm is just like, yeah, no, I'm not doing any of those things. I'm gonna do something completely off the wall, and we're just gonna see what happens. So it's really, really good, and actually ending up here in Prim, the ending sequence, and then credits shows us Prim. So this is one of the first locations you come to in the game, and it is based on the real life Prim. But we see the roller coaster, and then we see the Flash, and it all kind of degrades to look like what it looks like now. You've got the Vicky and Vance casino, and you see the Bison Steve hotel and casino, and the people on the roller coasters turn into skeletons and things. So really, really cool little sequence there. And then we see the Mojave Express, which is this building here. That's who your player character works for. Oh, what's his name's body's disappeared. So I do wonder if we will be visiting this location at some point in the series. And the preview of the season at the end of this gives us a few hints. We've not seen anything from Maximus or the Brotherhood in this episode, but there is hints that we're going to have a civil war within the Brotherhood, and some problems with the Commonwealth. So there's clearly something in the works there. And I really do wonder if Arthur Maxon's still alive, and he's still in charge in the Commonwealth, or if it's somebody else now. And for some reason, Thaddeus is leading a group of kids inside what looks like the Sunset Sarsaparilla factory or something, and he's obviously mutating and becoming more ghoul-like. And the snake oil chicken loving guy seems to be on his way to Vegas as well, so I do think he's going to pop up at some point, at least for some comic relief. And we are going to get to see New Vegas, Las Vegas in its heyday. Victor's here. Victor's brilliant. The Legion are here, and the NCR are still in the area. The Kings are all ghouls now, so I don't really know what's happened there. We know we're going to be seeing Rad Scorpions, and we're going to be seeing some Deathclaws. So yeah, very, very interesting start to the season, and it does show a lot of promise that things are going to be wild and very interesting. So really, really enjoyed it. Cannot wait for the next episodes. I do low key resent having to wait a week for each new episode, but I get why they're doing it that way. It's and it is how TV used to be, so that's fair enough. So now we're gonna pick up on episode 2. Okay, so episode 2, we get an interesting recap that highlights some scenes from season 1 that are going to be relevant to this episode, and does suggest that we're going to learn more about what happens with I'm just going to deal with these bark scorpions. This is Hidden Valley. This is where the Brotherhood are hiding in Fallout New Vegas, and they make these like sandstorms at night, which can be very confusing. But the Brotherhood in this save file like me, so we're perfectly safe. But we'll get some hints that we're going to learn more about what happened to Shady Sands and also what the Brotherhood is up to. And the opening of the episode, I think, is really interesting because at first, if you're not paying too much attention, it kind of feels like it is pre-war. We're starting out in the before the bombs, but then you notice a couple of little things like, that people are clean and dressed nicely, but there are clues. You can see some ruined buildings in the background. You can see NCR soldiers, especially if you played New Vegas, you know what the NCR soldiers look like. If you haven't played the game, you maybe don't know that you'd assume that they're just, regular US Army soldiers, but they're from the NCR. The NCR is a new nation that grew up out of Shady Sands and eventually spread as far as the Mojave Desert here and took over most of California. But there's other little hints and tips there that kind of that confirms that we are in the post-war era at some point. They're the man that we're focused on, he's testing the waters for radiation and things like that. So this is Shady Sands when everything was going good. Everybody was thriving, life was lifing, and everything was hunky dory. They found water that's clean and safe, which is obviously one of the most important things for survival, whether you're post apocalyptic or not. And you have to, I've lost my train of thought. But yeah, so, everything's going great. Shady Sands, we love it. Everything's happy. And then this caravaner arrives and he's got the pack Brahmin. So the two-headed cows are called Brahmin, if you don't know. And the line made me laugh out loud at first. I thought it was just going to be a little meme and a little joke saying patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter, because that is Fallout New Vegas's version of the Skyrim guards talking about how they used to be an adventurer like you and then took an arrow in the knee. Um, and because anytime if you're anywhere near NCR soldiers at any point in time, they will pretty much guaranteed to say patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter. But this guy's saying it over and over again like he's a glitchy, broken NPC. And he's saying that, this iconic line. So I found it quite funny at first, but it turns out it wasn't that funny. So he collapses and he's bleeding from the eyes and he's still saying this line over and over again. And the man that we've been following checks and sees this device on the back of his neck. I don't know whether he knows what it is or not, but he sees it and then he pulls the sort of tarpaulin or the cloth off the cart that the caravan's been pulling and they find a massive nuke underneath. So, yeah, obviously, big panic. And this man seems to be quite good with technology. He was making a water purifier and things like that. So he basically tells everyone to get out the way, sends his son, and you might recognise the kid from season 1, but he sends his son off home and then goes to try and disarm this nuke. Unfortunately, whoever created it built in a failsafe that means that if anyone tries to disarm it, it's going to automatically be set for detonation. 3 minutes is not a lot of time to evacuate an entire city when we're talking at like 35,000 people. But the way the couple react to this is interesting because it does feel like they kind of expected something like this to happen or they were worried that something like this was going to happen. There's the lights of Vegas turning on in the distance there. They expected this to happen, which makes me wonder if there had been, actual threats made. Oh, there's some coyotes. So it makes me wonder, has there been some kind of conflict and a threat and that they had a reason to believe that something like this might happen? It's hard to say, but the way they react, it does. And then they have a contingency plan where this little child gets shoved in a fridge, and they're just like, oh yeah, we did our best, we raised him, now it's up to him to carry on, we did good. And then the Flash and Shady Sands is no more. It's really quite a harrowing scene, actually. It's really sad. And that kind of then you realise maybe that this is Maximus as a child and that was his parents, that we've just seen. So they really do capture the tragedy of it all, and seeing that realisation, seeing the panic, and seeing that they're accepting that they did their best for their son and hoping that he's going to survive to live on, but also that acceptance that they're about to die and there's nothing they can do about it. It's really, really awful. And it does bring us back to this core theme of Fallout, which is, the way we talk about how war never changes and that people are always going to be, you know, stepping over each other and killing each other over things, and it's just this is just the way people are, and this is the way it's always going to be. But yeah, let's come up here. This is a little kind of memorial, but you can see Vegas in the distance. So that's Lucky 38 there, Mr. House's own casino. But yeah, this scene was quite hard to watch, really, and it's kind of understandable that Maximus would be angry, and as he said in season 1, he wants to hurt the people that hurt him, after going through that. And then the cut to Hank McClane, a younger version of Hank McClane in Vault 33 washing his hands. Symbolically, he's washing the blood of thousands of people off his hands as his Pip Boy cheerfully confirms that the detonation was successful, and he says okie dokie and goes to read Wind in the Willows to a young Lucy. It's so vile that he's just washing his hands and going back to being a good dad after wiping out an entire city like that. It's so vile, and yeah, I mean, it does seem like there was maybe a hint of guilt there. You would hope that there would be some, considering what he's just done, but it's really quite harrowing. And then we come to the present time, and Maximus is in some old facility clearing out feral ghouls. There we go, the Yankton Memorial. So he's clearing out feral ghouls to find something in this facility. He doesn't really know what it is, but he doesn't need to know. He's just following his orders. He's just doing what he's told, which is an interesting thing. And the way things are going to progress for him is going to be very interesting. It's fairly standard stuff for the Brotherhood that, they're looking for this technology and they're looking for, to preserve it and to protect it from misuse. That was kind of the goal. And a big part of that comes from the founder of the Brotherhood of Steel. They began as members of the US Army, and a man named Roger Maxson realised that he was protecting scientists that were doing horrible experiments on people, and rebelled and took over the facility at the Mariposa military base just before the bombs fell. And they established this brotherhood that would ensure that that kind of thing doesn't happen again, and that humanity is protected from the dangerous technology that could destroy itself, which is what led to the Great War in the first place. Just trying to remember what this little place is here. I don't remember. Abandoned shack. I don't remember what this is. So, but they find the thing, and it's like, I don't care what it is, we're going to take it because that's what we've been sent for, and that's all hunky dory. And then the problem is that the Brotherhood evolved and became more cult-like as time went on. And they became very involved in themselves, and they're very isolationist. They don't trust outsiders, and they're really not the good guys. And even when they are the good guys, they're still not great in terms of ethics or morals or anything like that. So it's hard to see them as the good guys, really. Um, and we should always be cautious when the Brotherhood are getting involved. But they take it back to the airship and they're flying over to something, and we see a couple of, I think they're scribes or they're like squires, and they pull open the little rocket ship. on a children's playground and shove in a fusion core. So the rocket ship gives us a bit of a hint as to where we are, and this is going to be the Brotherhood's new home. It's, new facility, and it seems to be somewhere in the Mojave Desert, so in the Vegas area in Nevada. And once they open it up, it's Area 51. Secret government facility in the Mojave Desert. Don't talk about it. Don't ask about it. It's not real. Absolutely nothing happens here at Area 51. So stop asking questions. Which, yeah, that's going to be interesting. Because again, it was something that people kind of assumed that should have been in this game as Area 51, given it's one of the most kind of infamous secret government facilities. Because of the alien connection. So we'll come back to that. But Lucy and the ghoul are walking the Mojave and they're talking about things, and Lucy's trying to convince the ghoul that a bit of kindness goes a long way. And she uses A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens to do this, which is hilarious. That she thinks that maybe if he just gets visited by a few ghosts, he might actually start being a decent person again. Which is hysterical. I'm guessing they don't have the Muppets version of the movie to watch in that universe, which is kind of sad because that's the best Christmas movie ever. And I do love how straight Michael Caine plays the role when he's interacting with mostly Muppets. Anyway, the girl's not having it, and we hear someone shouting for help as they pass by a facility called Affordable Al's Discount Hospital, which promises treatment for the new plague, among other things. And that's something that's very interesting. The new plague was a pre-war disease, and it caused a serious epidemic. Also, apparently caused socialism. Um, but anyway, it was a serious problem, and it still is, because it's had quite an impact on the wasteland as we see it now, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because the contagion itself still exists. MacCready, who is a companion in Fallout 4, but also was a character included in Fallout 3 as a child, his son has it, and he's looking for a cure. And the kind of arguably more important aspect of the new plague is that they obviously made attempts to find a cure or find a working vaccine for it or something like that. And that led to the creation of the forced evolutionary virus known as FEV. And this virus is hugely important because a lot of the horrifying abominations that we see in the wasteland were created using FEV, and a lot of the time on purpose. So we've not really met any super mutants yet in the TV show, but they were created with FEV on purpose. And we did see a hint of one at the Enclave facility. When you see Wilzig walking out, there's something on a gurney with a sheet, and you see this big green hand sticking out under the sheet. That is almost certainly a super mutant of some kind under there. We haven't seen any in the show yet, but also the trailers hint that we're going to be seeing a Deathclaw at some point this season, and they were also created using FEV. And it was all done by like the government and the military, so it's not not even accidental, but there's a lot of that kind of thing going around. So quite an important thing. But there's somebody shouting for help, so Lucy insists on going to help. The ghoul reluctantly follows, and we find this woman who's wearing a dirty white tunic with a red cross on it, and the ghoul recognises it and says she's awful far west, which is very interesting. Oh, there's a gecko. Um, and it took me a minute to really understand what he was getting at, but then I realised what it was. And he says, she's awful far west, and it would be a profound misallocation of resources. Folks in them outfits don't deserve saving. Oh, he doesn't care. Okay, bye. The geckos are so funny. So he's just like, yeah, no, we should be leaving. Obviously the girl knows something that Lucy doesn't at this point. And then a man makes himself known dressed the same, and he's injured. And the girl just goes and kills him instantly and then decides to eat him, which is horrific. But something's wrong, and the girl doesn't finds that eating this man doesn't agree with him in some capacity, which is an interesting thing because ghouls, even feral ghouls and normal ghouls, can eat food that's rotten. They can eat just about anything. They don't get food poisoning as far as we know. But obviously there's something wrong with this guy for him to be off putting to the ghoul, and he lifts the guy up to find this nasty festering wound, and then we hear the scuttling. Um, so it's rad scorpions. And the baby ones aren't too bad. They're small, a skillet or a gun, easy peasy. And that's fine. But then the big one comes through the door and eats her babies before attacking. Isn't nature beautiful? Lovely. But the girl gets stung and so does the woman before he defeats the rad scorpion with a well placed grenade. He's resourceful. But Lucy then has to make a choice on who to save, and she obviously takes a minute to weigh up the options because on the one hand we've got this poor woman who's injured and is largely defenseless versus the ghoul who is her companion but also has done some things that she's really disgusted about and is more durable than this human woman. So she chooses the woman to help because she's only got the one stim pack, but she says, the ghoul invokes the golden rule, and Lucy says that's why she's going to come back for him later. And she leaves with this woman. So we need to talk about her outfit. Um, and Caesar's Legion is, again, it's not one that you would know about if you've not played Fallout New Vegas, but Caesar's Legion, they originated in kind of Arizona. Oh, we've got some giant ants. That bark scorpion as well. So they originated in Arizona and they made their way west and fought against the NCR over the Hoover Dam twice. And by the end of Fallout New Vegas, they fight over it twice. And they're still around. We know they're still around in some capacity, and they're styled after the ancient Romans. So and this includes things like crucifixions and keeping slaves, and that's what this woman is dressed like as a legion slave. So they make them wear these tunics with a red cross, and that marks them as slaves. They're usually made to carry a massive backpack of stuff. So that's who this woman is, and she is leading Lucy into the wolf's den, and Lucy has no idea what's waiting for her, unfortunately. And the woman speaks Latin as well, and Latin's technically a dead language, so you'd be kind of wondering who's teaching random people to speak Latin. But Caesar's Legion insist on using Latin words all the time, even though most of them probably don't even know what half of it means. But it's something that was insisted on. You'd also hear them referring to him as Caesar, which is the actual kind of pronunciation of the time. Caesar is the kind of more westernized pronunciation of, or the more anglicized pronunciation of the name Caesar. But you do kind of hear that quite a lot. What on earth is that ant doing? That just looked really funny for a second. So yeah, it's not gonna go great for Lucy, unfortunately. If she's gonna end up caught up with Caesar's Legion because they are definitely not the good guys in any capacity. But we go back to Vault 31, and Buds are all waking up and defrosting. They're not all coming out of cryo unscathed. There's one man pukes, and there's another woman that seems to have gone blind, unfortunately. And Norm is still, I think, not 100% sure exactly what he's going to do here, but he's kind of starting to find his feet, and he's sort of trying to convince them that Bud Askins is dead. He's not, he's in the bin. Don't know what that was all about. But yeah, so Norm is still finding his feet, but he's convinced these people that he's Bud Askins' successor, and they need to find a way out of the vault for Reclamation Day. Um, it seems to be going well for him. He's still trying to figure out exactly how he's going to play this, but you can see him starting to work out the best approach and start to take control. So if you want to see some of the horrible things that Legion did, here's Nipton, where the town was wiped out in a lottery where one guy got to live with two broken legs, and everybody else was crucified or burned or otherwise brutally murdered. So yeah, so they're using like telephone poles and things to crucify people. So that's nice. And Hank's still in his secret facility, wherever that is, doing his thing. He's exploding mice mostly and playing with a yo-yo. So testing out the miniaturized versions of these control device things. Um, so many mice have lost their lives in the pursuit of innovation and progress. It's quite sad in a lot of ways, really, when you think about it. But anyway, it is hilarious that the mice have tiny little terminals and desks, and it looks like the terminals might have one of the Pip-Boy games from Fallout 4 running on it, and tiny little water coolers, which is hilarious. It reminds me of a photo somebody sent me once. I used to keep rats. I've had rats as pets before. Being a vet, you acquire animals as rescues. It's just part of the thing. And someone sent me a picture of someone that had rats that made them tiny little beds with mattresses, and then made little pajamas that matched the mattresses for these rats. So I didn't go quite that far with my little ratties, but it was quite funny, and it kind of makes me think of that, like why have these mice got tiny little terminals? It's hilarious. But that's something that they decided to do. But unfortunately, the testing isn't going well, and the mice keep exploding. And it looks quite messy. So I thought interesting side note is that the kind of volume of blood in a mouse is calculated at 80 milliliters per kilogram of body weight. Average lab mouse weighs between 25 and 40 grams. The males tend to be slightly bigger. So that means that their average blood volume is 1.8 to 2 mils of blood, which is, if it's sprayed at speed, it can make quite a mess. And we obviously don't see the actual explosion happening because they wouldn't be doing it for real. No animals would be harmed in the making of anything like this. It's just not something that is allowed to happen anymore because obviously it's detrimental to the animal's welfare to put them through stuff like that. And if they do use live animals in any kind of TV or film production, then as far as I know, it's the same in Hollywood as it is here, that you have to have a vet on set. Ugh. You have to have a vet on set to make sure that the animals are protected from harm and looked after properly and things like that. It is something that I've done as a vet before. There was an advert being filmed near where I used to work, and there was a dog involved, so I got to be a vet on set. Wasn't as exciting as you might think, but it was interesting to see how it actually works in the background. So, that's something that I have done. I have also been on TV as a vet as well, which was interesting. But, it's kind of sad, but they wouldn't have that's why we just see the splatter. They've obviously set something up to make it look realistic, but without actually doing any harm to the poor little mice. But Vault-Tec aren't going to care. They don't care about the people. They're not going to care about the mice. But yeah, it doesn't seem like the tests of whatever it is that they're trying to do is going very well for Hank, but he's going to just keep at it. And then we get to go back to the Brotherhood and see what's happening inside Area 51. And you can kind of see in the establishing shot that there's a UFO that's covered with a tarp. And they open a freezer and find an alien in there, frozen literal alien, and nobody cares. They just pull it out of there and dump it on the floor, excited about the fact that they've got a working icebox. They don't care that there's a literal alien there. And we know that aliens exist in our canon in the Fallout universe. And this one looks exactly like the Zetans that you do see in Fallout 3, and you can also see in this game as well. Aliens do exist in this game, in this continuity, so bear that in mind. But they're just excited about a working freezer, which is hilarious. I find that a little bit really quite funny and kind of silly. And then they find this lovely shiny red sports car and immediately blow it up with a minigun because um all the cars in Fallout are fusion powered, so you can explode them and they make a nice big bang. You can use that to your advantage in the game. But they're not interested in the car or how it works, they just want to blow it up because it's fun. Um, it's bonkers. But they've obviously brought all the cold fusion stuff from the Griffith Observatory to here, and they're setting it up to kind of get themselves organised. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they're doing. And then we get Maximus giving a child squire a lecture on why you should wash your face, which is fair enough. Soap and water can go a long way to making society better in some ways, I guess. But it's kind of a weird, like, why do you do that? And he's literally washing his face. It's really funny. Um, but Maximus isn't questioning the Brotherhood. He's not questioning what he's been told to do. And he seems to be relishing the recognition that he's getting because of what he's done, or at least what he appears to have done. That he's taking credit for killing Moldaver when it wasn't actually him. But he's getting all these accolades now, and he's getting taken seriously now. I think that's the thing. But um, Dane seems to be very concerned, and I think their actor plays it really, really well. But Dane tells him that Quintus has called a meeting with the other chapters of the Brotherhood, but is keeping the Commonwealth out of the loop, and this is going to become a problem. And then all the airships arrive, so we know that the Pridwen isn't the only one that they have. They've obviously built several of them for transport between different locations. And we meet the Brotherhood leaders from some other locations from the Grand Canyon, which I'm assuming is kind of Arizona area, from the Yosemite, and from Coronado, which is like the San Diego area, I believe. And they're kind of somewhat autonomous, but they're still supposed to be subordinate to the Commonwealth. And we know that in Fallout 4, Arthur Maxim was the elder of the East Coast chapter, and also the kind of last living descendant of Roger Maxon, who started the Brotherhood in the first place. But we don't really know yet if he's still in charge. But we can see that the Brotherhood is deteriorating further down the cult pipeline. In a lot of ways. Oh, what's coming after me now? Ants. So let's do that. We've got this kind of meeting of Brotherhood leaders that they're basically going to come in and seize power, and Quintus doesn't want the Commonwealth to know about the relic, the cold fusion, because he doesn't want them to take it. But when Arthur Maxon became elder, there was a lot of kind of cults worshipping him that popped up in the West Coast chapters of the Brotherhood that had to be kind of put down in an essence. So it's interesting, and there's really, I think, lowered standards in the Brotherhood. They're acting very childish, playing about with plasma grenades, which really is not a good idea. It's kind of the Brotherhood equivalent of don't run with scissors, because it's all fun and games until somebody loses an eye or a limb. But just the way that they're acting and things, it's become this kind of boys' club, and stupid toxic masculinity kind of nonsense. This kind of it's bonkers. But the Brotherhood goes through these cycles of where they kind of figure out, okay, we need to change in order to survive, and then they do better for a little while, and then it all goes to pot again. So, if a civil war breaks out, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, I think, and how the Commonwealth are going to handle it. And it's at the end of the day, pretty much all the conflicts, even the pre-war conflicts, were all over power in the literal sense. Having access to the last remaining fossil fuels and things like that for electricity, And in the post-war, it's become the same thing. So the whole conflict behind this game, Fallout New Vegas, is over Hoover Dam, which is a hydroelectric dam. So if you control the dam, you've got clean, unlimited electricity, which can be obviously a big benefit to survival and things like that. So it's not a surprise that everybody wants it and everybody wants to be the one in control of the dam. And that's why you do have these four factions essentially fighting over it. And you decide who you want to get the dam. That's kind of the main part of the story in this game, is that you decide who gets to keep the dam and use it. Because that electricity is so important. So, it's interesting to see how this is going to play out now that they have cold fusion, which is an even better, you know, a better way of producing electricity, and more electricity than Hoover Dam can generate. So again, you can understand why everybody wants it, and what, they all know the potential of what they can do with it. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. And then we go back to Vault 31, where Norm is manipulating them on the fly with merit dots, which are, well, in the States they call them band-aids, I call them plasters. But that's enough to get them to go into problem-solving mode. It's really funny. I think where this goes is going to be hilarious. And I can't wait to see what they do next once they find their way outside, which they do. And then we've got Hank, who's defrosting Premium Elite Plus residents at the Secret Vault Tech facility and using them as test subjects. I guess he's had enough of exploding mice. But he also lectures Steve about family, which I think is very interesting, because this man, whoever he was, obviously somebody very wealthy that only paid for his own spot in this Super Premium Elite Plus thing, and not any of his family. So I'm quite concerned about Hank's intentions for Lucy and potentially Norm if he discovers that Norm has left the vault as well. What he actually intends to do. So I think that's going to be very interesting. And then we end up back at Area 51, where the boys are fighting and entertaining themselves by punching each other, and then one of the new guys in the Brotherhood challenges Maximus to a bareback fight, and he gets involved in it and ends up killing the guy, and everyone approves except Dane. I'm really worried about Maximus. I really feel like he's getting sucked into this new mentality, and I think it's going to be very dangerous for him. And he's probably going to find himself with some moral quandaries that he has to think about, and then make decisions about what exactly he is going to do, and if he's going to keep doing what Quintus wants him to do, because I think that's going to lead him down a very dark path. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. And then we've got a new arrival in a vertibird from the Commonwealth, and this is Paladin Harkness. Now, I might be reaching here, but he's apparently here as an envoy due to the brewing civil war and the Brotherhood. Now, there was a character called Harkness in Fallout 3, and he was the head of security of Rivet City, which is a city and an aircraft carrier in the Potomac in DC. And a lot of the Brotherhood that we met in Fallout 4 came from the Capital Wasteland, came from this area. So is this name a coincidence? I don't know, but it's possible it's not. Because but the thing is, the Harkness in Fallout 3 is a synth. They call them androids in that game, but they're synths. So synthetic humans that are indistinguishable without killing the person and finding a synth component in their head. There's no way to tell. And we do know that there was at least one synth who was unaware that they were a synth that joined the Brotherhood in Fallout in the Capital Wasteland. And that's Paladin Danse, who is a companion in Fallout 4. He came from Rivet City as well, apparently. So I might be reaching, I might be wrong, but it would be very interesting if this Paladin Harkness was picked up in Rivet City as well, and the Brotherhood somehow have no idea that he's actually a synth. It might not be, but I just thought it was interesting to note, because that quest was written and implemented long before Fallout 4 was created, so it's well entrenched in the lore on that side of the world, and it's possible that the Brotherhood have recruited him but have no idea that he's actually a synth. we'll have to see. I think the Brotherhood, it's going to be very, very interesting to see how that plays out, and I wonder how much we're going to learn about what's actually happening over in the Commonwealth in Boston. What's going on there? Who's in charge of the Brotherhood completely now and everything? Is it still Arthur Maxon, or is somebody else taking up the mantle? Really looking forward to seeing what happens. We didn't get any updates from Vault 32 or 33 in this episode. I've the previews certainly suggest that things are about to get absolutely bonkers in there, so looking forward to that. And then at the end here, Lucy comes across a location with flags, so I find I can kind of see it in the distance there. So the Legion flag. So Lucy is now in Legion territory. Talking about cultural differences, but she is a real lost lamb in the wolves' den at this point, and it's going to get her in a lot of trouble, I think. But yes, that's the flag. This is Legion flag. So you'll hear people talk about the bull and the bear. So the bear is the NCR. They have the California state flag, but the bear has two heads instead of one. And Caesar's Legion have this bull that's kind of gold on a red background, and they style themselves after the Romans. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see where they go from this. Obviously, we're incorporating quite a few things from Fallout New Vegas. So for those who haven't played the games or don't want to play the games but still want to know, I do have videos covering quite a lot of these things, as do several other Fallout YouTubers out there. So it's very, very interesting to see where they're going to go with this, because obviously no matter who won the second Battle of Hoover Dam and took over, it's clear that remnants of all the factions have stayed in the area and are operating in some capacity. So, because people have speculated on which ending of Fallout New Vegas is going to be canon, and I think to a degree it doesn't really matter, because quite a lot of time has passed. We're talking 15 years, because this is 2281. And the TV show takes place 15 years after this, so a lot could change in that time. So, whoever actually won that almost doesn't matter, because the factions are still here in some capacity, which would make sense and could happen anyway. No matter who won, we don't really know, but I'm looking forward to finding out. So, I say this is a big one today, but from now on, it's going to be on a Thursday after each new episode drops, and we'll talk about things. So, as always, I love to hear your guys' thoughts as well. What did you think about the first couple of episodes? Do you have any thoughts about what's going to happen next? Share everything in the comments. I'd always love to hear from you guys about your thoughts. And this will be the last update of this year. As it's Hogmanay tomorrow, it's New Year's Eve. So have a good new year, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye.